a partnership has been born. And I knew Gabby from, I've heard her present at League of Women Voters, but I also know Gabby because we went to church together. And you are in for a treat because Gabby's interest in the topic of death goes way back, actually. And she introduced at our church many years ago something called Death Over Dinner. How about that? And they would have dinners and they would discuss issues of death. But Gabby's continued to educate herself and she's so passionate about this. She now is actually a certified death doula. You've heard about the doulas that help bring babies into the world. Gabby is certified to help people get out of the world. So she's a fabulous presenter. She is a scientist. She taught at LCC for years and years and years. She is an expert on the subject. And like I said, you're in for a treat. I'm so glad that you're all here. Stay tuned because we have some more presentations up our sleeve for later in the fall about artificial intelligence, another non-partisan issue. So thank you very much. Gabby?
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me. When you hear these introductions, it always sounds so much better than how you feel about yourself. Anyway, yes, I'm very interested in anything death related. It started maybe in 2012 when my dad passed away, and I was present when he died, and it was such an incredibly moving, having an impact on my life event that from there on I learned a lot about death, and I attended several classes in Ann Arbor. There's a very active death community with Marilyn Rush, and I learned about home funerals and also advanced directives. So before you die, there's a lot you need to do. And then about the whole death culture. And so here I am. And I'm just a volunteer. I'm in no way a professional about this, but I just like to share what I have learned. And usually I know a little more than the audience. So that's sort of just one step ahead. So I do give talks about different death-related issues, and I'll come back to this in a while. But for today, similar what the League of Women Voters wanted, it's sort of an overview of body disposition options, and that's the term the industry uses, body disposition. It's sort of a weird term, but that's what it is. We'll talk a little bit about the environmental impact. I'm sure you are all interested in that. But in general, what's available in Michigan, what's legal in Michigan. So we'll take it from there. And since we are a relatively small group, there will be plenty of time at the end to ask questions. And as a matter of fact, I have some paper there. If anybody needs some paper to take notes, feel free to grab that. And also, if there's anything right during the talk that you feel, oh, I really need to know this now, feel free to stop me. I have no problems with being interrupted. I've talked at LCC for years and I've been interrupted many times. It's no problem at all. So here already is sort of our main topic of the day, and then we'll embellish it with other things. But you have a traditional cemetery and then something how it could be if we would all think a little bit greener. So the options we're talking about today, we'll quickly cover conventional burial just to review and summarize what that means. We'll talk about cremation and the new thing, Aquamation. You may or may not have heard about that. I'm going to talk about body donation because often people in the audience have willed their bodies, often to MSU in this area. So we're going to talk about that. And then, of course, we'll talk about natural burial. We'll talk about human composting. And we'll talk about conservation burial, which sort of falls into natural burial together. So conventional burial, and I have to say that many of my graphics were provided by Annika Quakenbush. She and her husband are starting a conservation burial ground in West Michigan, and she was nice enough to let me use her graphics. So in a conventional burial, the body is first of all embalmed. Then the body is put into a coffin, which is often hardwood or any kind of metal, can be quite expensive metal. And then the entire coffin is put into a vault. The vault can either be concrete or it can be some kind of metal again. And then the coffin is buried usually about 6 feet under. And we have a rather large gravestone to mark the grave. And this whole thing is in a cemetery that is maintained to look beautiful. So there's a lot of maintenance, which also means there may be chemicals involved in just a lot of mowing and keeping it up to looking good. So that's a conventional burial. And what that means is that we use a lot of resources to bury. Basically, conventional cemeteries are a big landfill. If you think about it, what's all buried under the ground. And just 2 million gallons of embalming fluid. So in 2019, before the pandemic, we had 2.85 million deaths in this country. And about half of the people are embalmed that get buried. But if we only say 1 million of those got embalmed, which is probably quite a low number, you need about 2 gallons of embalming fluid per person. So you are at 2 million gallons. And as I said, that's probably a conservative number. I mean, that gets all put into the ground, and embalming fluid is not particularly healthy for the people who are the embalmers. So that's a problem. And then there's a whole bunch of other things that happen. And I just read another number, and I have not verified it, but I found it interesting. It said that if you take a 10-acre traditional cemetery, there is enough wood in the ground to build 40 homes. And I thought, wow. So if there is any carpenter here that can sort of figure that out, how much wood do you need per coffin? And it seemed like a lot to me, but I think it's a great visual. So it's just amazing what we bury. And it's there forever, right? I mean, nobody is going to dig any of this up. And even if you have cemeteries that fill up, which is happening a lot lately, and often if you have a cemetery that's a commercial cemetery, the company will walk away from those cemeteries, but nothing can happen there. You know, nothing can be built, nothing. I mean, it's just sort of like a landfill. There it is. And that's a concern. Okay, so if we look at a green burial in comparison, first of all, the grave is way, way shallower. The reason is air needs to get to the body because air helps aerobic digestion, decomposition. So we want a lot of air get to the body. The body is not embalmed. The body can be placed in a wooden, very simple coffin, like a pine coffin. So you want renewable wood. It's fast growing wood. I mean, it can be in a wicker basket. There is felted containers, outer containers. You can have a shroud made of linen or cotton. Anything that's biodegradable. That's the most important thing here. Okay, so and then you have a no vault, and you usually have no gravestone or a very small engraved field stone that will mark the grave. Yeah.
How about a refrigerator box from Home Depot as a?
Yeah, you were interesting. I just read about that in the book, and the gentleman wanted a refrigerator box. I don't think from Home Depot, but he wanted a refrigerator box. So yes, anything, a cardboard box is perfectly fine. I would probably cut it down a little bit because the refrigerator is quite high. So if you can make it sort of cut it so it's just around the body, but anything goes as long as it's biodegradable. Yes, there's no problem in if it's dirty enough. Yeah.
Are bodies buried naked then, because of the clothing?
So the clothing should be biodegradable. I don't think, I'm sure the option certainly is. So if you have like a shroud, whatever is under there is under there. I think sometimes people are wrapped in a shroud and then put in a coffin. It's all up to the family in a way, or you making your wishes known. That's actually one of the most important things. Communication. And then you work in Michigan, you have to work with a funeral director, but you still have an option of home funerals. So we can go into details a little about that later if there's need for that. But yes, so whatever. But we do really, I mean, anything should be biodegradable. And the green burial grounds, they're also not necessarily there in perpetuity. So many green burial sites say after 30 years, which is usually assumed, then there's nothing left of the body, then the grave can be reused. So we don't run into this issue of running out of space. And I'm from Germany, this is what's normal there. You basically lease any cemetery plot for 30 years. And then after 30 years, the family has the option of buying it again. So if there's younger people in the family that just can't think of having this grave sort of disappear in somebody else, and they can say we want another 30 years. But otherwise, yeah, after 30 years, there's just the grave is reused.
Are cremations ever put in green burials?
Yes, we'll mention that. Yes, totally. So you can have urns, and again, they need to be biodegradable urns put into a grave. And then several green burial grounds also have scattering areas for ashes. So that's up to you. That's a good question. So green burial. The one question that comes up, what about soil and water contamination? So I know in Williamston, and I'll get to Williamston in a few minutes, you always have to contact the health department if you want to do some changes in the cemetery. And they check the water level, and then they sort of say, well, you know, it's a little bit too close to the water level. Although in general, there's no evidence that bodies in green cemeteries have contaminated the water. It's sort of more of, so there's science versus how do we feel about this, right? And the soil itself is a perfect filter for any kind of liquids that we may find unsanitary to filter all of this out. So soil is the perfect surrounding area for a body to make sure that nothing that we don't want in our water gets into the water. And then the other question I often get is, what about animals? Will they dig up the grave because it's so much shallower than a regular grave? And there have been extensive studies concerning that. And there's no evidence whatsoever. There's no odor. People are concerned about that, of course. And there's also no problem with animals digging up the grave. So we can be all assured that there is no issue with this. And then people ask me, so I already have a plot in a traditional cemetery, but really would like it a little bit greener, but I don't want to give up my plot. I mean, some of them cost quite a bit of money, right? And not all cemeteries let you easily buy them back. Some will. And they're also, I've heard you can buy them on eBay. Can buy cemetery plots. Yeah. So, you know, if you're stuck with it, you will have a little bit of a problem getting rid of it. But you could approach the cemetery, and if it's a traditional cemetery, they probably will insist on a vault. But you could, and I'll go back to this, you could negotiate with them if you have a vault that the coffin is set right onto the dirt, onto the ground, and then the vault is just like a lid, like a butter dish that goes on top of the coffin, right? So the coffin is in direct contact with the soil. The Jewish community uses this option a lot because the contact with the soil is part of their burial ritual. The same for the Muslim community. Sometimes they drill holes into the coffin to sort of make that connection even closer. So if you want that, that's already better than having the entire thing surrounded with a vault. And then you certainly can opt for a very plain coffin. Every funeral home has that kind of coffin somewhere. It may not be the first one they show you, but clearly if you walk in and say, I do want a pine coffin, or you may even just opt for a cardboard box. They clearly have that. And I want to mention here, you can order a coffin from anywhere you want and have it shipped to the funeral home, and they have to accept it. So you don't have to be there when it gets delivered. You can order coffins from Costco, very cost effective. So you have some options to work around this whole, oh, I'm stuck in this, traditional cemetery, because we don't have that many green burial grounds yet available. And then even maybe without a coffin, if you work with the funeral director and you say, I really want to be shrouded and laid on the ground, and then for heaven's sake, put that vault on top, because that's important for the cemeteries to mow the ground, so the ground is very nice and even, and it doesn't sort of get a little bit bumpy as the coffins degrade. So you can work with them. It's all about planning early. It's really difficult when you have a body laying there and starting to negotiate with funeral directors and cemeteries and the family. And oh my goodness, now what are we going to do? Right? Because you do not have much time, especially if you don't want to talk about embalming.
Is the funeral director and the cemetery owner have to be in agreement? I mean, do you have to use the funeral director? If you have an in-home funeral, can you skip all that?
Would be nice, wouldn't it? Michigan is one of the few states where we have to deal with the funeral director. Well, start lobbying. So we just have to. Having said this, there are wonderful funeral directors in this area. It's just a matter of talking to them. So there will be funeral, and believe me, I've been to every single funeral home in every single county surrounding Ingham County, because I've done price comparisons. So there are very into green burial funeral directors, and some that are a little bit hesitant because they think the bodies don't look so good when there's a viewing, all of these things. But talk to them. It's really true. So what we have in Michigan is a funeral director files for the death certificate. They contact Social Security if it is needed. And they have to oversee the transportation of the body, really? Which we often interpret as they have to transport the body. They're sort of in gray area. But, for example, if you want to have a home funeral, and let's say the person died at home, which is the best, right? That's the easiest. Hospice, home, death, you can have the body right there. But then at some point, let's say the family is willing to deal with the body, wash the body, dress the body, cool the body, have it laid out for a few days, perfect. And then when it comes time to take the body to wherever the next step is, a cemetery or a crematory, a funeral director at least has to oversee the body. Many of us don't have cars to transport bodies. So then often a funeral director comes in and transports the body to wherever it needs to go. Okay. Or let's say somebody dies at a hospital, you still would like to have a home funeral. The body has to be transported from the hospital to the home. Again, there will be funeral directors who have no problems with that. Sometimes it's not very practical, depending what the illness was. So maybe the body is taken to the funeral home, and then the funeral director transfers. But that's what we are, and there are not very many states in the United States where that is necessary. But I have also heard, let's say there is a young child that dies, a baby, the parents want to make the coffin, transport the baby, So if a funeral director says, okay, I'll oversee the loading of the body, I'm there, I'm receiving you when you get to the cemetery, there are many funeral directors who will certainly work with the family. I mean, they are a business that wants to make money, but I think we also have to admit, I mean, they are also people, and they also want to help families, definitely. So, yeah.
Do you have records of which are accommodating and which are?
I have a little bit. I don't want to veer off too much of our topic today, but I'm actually giving next month a topic at the Hannah Center, at the Senior Center, and that's all about how to save money and what kind of cost-effective options do you have. And you can also call me and talk to me. I'll give you my contact information. But we want to get through this, so if we have more time, then we can get into this later. Okay, so where are there green burial sites in Michigan? Interestingly enough, the Keweenaw Peninsula is really active. They are just incredible. They have incredible YouTube videos. I don't know how it all started there, but it's amazing to me. In Marquette, then we have something in Traverse City. You notice they're different colors. So the green ones, there is something called the Green Burial Council, and they are sort of the organic certifier of green burial sites. And it is a little time consuming. It is very restricted what can be called a green burial site. So not all cemeteries, although they offer green burial ground, will go through the certification. But the ones that are green are certified. The blue ones are not certified, but they do have green burial sites. So they do adhere to no embalming, no vault, and all of these things. They just don't undergo the certification. And then the two pink ones, Williamston, I'll get to that in a minute, because I've been working on that for 7 years. So hopefully we'll be there soon. And then this one is this conservation burial ground in Owego by this young couple, and I will talk about that in just a minute more. Which will be the first in the United States. It's one step further than having just a green burial site. And we are only about a handful, well, I think there are less than 20 in the entire United States. And so this will be the very first one in Michigan, which is fantastic. So here is one that is in Waterford, Michigan. It's connected to a traditional burial ground. It's a private cemetery. I mean, I think they have money, and it's just beautiful. I mean, if you ever are in that area, it's close to Clarkston, it's worth going and seeing it. It's just beautiful. You have a traditional cemetery with all the things that are traditional, and then there is a green wall here, and then it's prairie and lovely, and little walking path, and the little water creek going through, and it's just absolutely beautiful. So, next, so the couple, Peter and Annika Quakenbush, who bought a big forested area in the west of Michigan in Owego, are in the process of turning this into a conservation burial ground. And what it is, it's sort of nature conservancy meets cemetery. So they acquire land. The land will be kept as whatever it is in perpetuity, and then they also offer graves on that land. And it's, I think, quite a process to get this all established. As you can imagine, I mean, there's always a lot of regulation and, you know, little issues. But Peter will be on a Zoom meeting next Wednesday. Meridian Township has a program called Green Dialogue. Every Wednesday morning at 9 o'clock, they have Zoom meetings, and they will have all kinds of green topics. And so next Wednesday, Peter will be the speaker on that. And it's only a Zoom meeting, but anybody, it's open to the public. And if you contact me, I'll send you the link. But if you just go to the Meridian Township Green Dialogue, it will come up with a date for last October. I mean, don't ask me why they didn't update it, but it will give you a link that you can click on, and then you get right into that Zoom meeting if you're interested to hear what they're going through. And Peter said somebody maybe here who has signed up for is that gentleman here? No, okay. He said there was a gentleman who would come today, and he is one of their future clients, I guess that's how you say. So Williamston Summit Cemetery off Beeman Road is a traditional cemetery. It's a beautiful cemetery. It's very, very old. And when I got into this whole thing, I had contacted several cemeteries in Lansing to see if they would be open to green burial area. And Parks and Rec Department oversees the cemeteries in Lansing at least. And I never heard back from them. And I tried it a couple of times. So then I was like, well, I do live in Williamston Township, so I guess we'll try them. And it was just great because they already had on their 5-year plan that they wanted to add a green part. Nothing had ever happened. So for 7 years, I finally wiggled myself onto the cemetery board, which was not easy, but I'm on it now. And so it's there. I mean, the area is there. We had to go through all these health department things, and it wasn't very straightforward. It took a while. We needed to get soil to build the land up and all of these things, but it's there. It's now seeded with wildflowers. And eventually we will have pathways in the prairie in a spiral form so people can walk the prairie. These little squares are all the different burial plots. Not every grave will be marked. We will have shepherd's walls at the beginning. This is the traditional cemetery down here. And the names of the loved ones can be engraved in there. And there will be a scattering garden. And hopefully we will find somebody who will plant some trees. So hopefully at our next cemetery meeting, which I'm hoping is within the next few months, we will set the price structure, and then there it is, and it can be used. So I'm very, very excited about this. And they were very, I mean, everybody was just so, let's do it, but to get it done. Yes.
Can you share just ballpark costs when you talk about this project over the cost of the service?
I mean, there wasn't really much cost. We got the soil for free.
No, I mean, if I wanted to be buried.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think right now we're talking maybe the plots, it's a public cemetery, so the plots are like $600 or $700 for non-resident. And then what happens at every cemetery, you have opening and closing of the grave, and probably green cemeteries are a little bit more expensive because there's a little bit of maintenance. So as the coffin degrades, there will be some sinking of the soil. So it has to be sort of amended a bit with a little bit of extra soil and maybe reseeded. It's not a big thing, but the sexton has a little more work with the grave. But it's very, very reasonable compared to many others. And now I'm thinking, oh dear, now we need to have like a dry run. We need to get some funeral directors out there and practice. How do we do this? Because I mean, it's not like you have a vault company that makes a vault and sets up a tent and they take care of everything. Now somebody has to dig a hole, right? So it's the sexton, but maybe the family wants to be involved, but there's probably, you know, it's just some dirt there. So anyway, at the next cemetery meeting, I will say we need to have some kind of practice about this. And we need to see which funeral directors are really willing to help with this. And is it the cemetery's problem to say to the family, well, you need to find some ball pairs to do all of this, right? And, you know, we need to secure the site and all of this. Or is it the funeral home that's going to do this? And what are they going to charge? So, you know, it's one thing to have a cemetery, but now it's like, okay, how do we, you know, gracefully and, you know, respectfully get the body into the ground? Particularly if it's a shrouded body. I mean, you know, it's not that easy. So we'll work on it. We'll get there. So any more questions about me?
That was one question I kept thinking, like, for instance, what was the first people you contacted? Is the city hall? I mean, the mayor or?
You need to find out who is in charge of your cemetery. So as I said, in Lansing is Parks and Rec. In Williamston, it was the township office. I just called the township supervisor. In DeWitt, Melanie, do you know?
Don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's the township, or it's the city.
It would be the city.
Yeah. And it's relatively easy, really. I mean, it's really up to the individual cities, townships, whatsoever. So it really is the citizens that need to push for this. Say, we want this. Like the person in Lansing who never ever got back to me. I'm sure if people in Lansing would say, hey, we do want this, it's going to happen. And there is now a group they're working in the East Lansing area to first find a cemetery that may have some space. They're called hybrids, if you have green and traditional, or find some space for a new cemetery. But, you know, you can imagine then the regulations. I mean, it takes a while. It's not something that just comes. So, okay, let's talk about cremation on the alternative aquamation. In the 1980s, 10% of the people were cremated. It was really low. And now they're predicting that by 2040, 80% of people will be cremated, unless we change it all around because of our concerns about the climate. And we're like, it sounded good for a long time, but maybe we just need to rethink this whole thing with the cremation, because it takes quite a bit of energy to cremate a body. As you see, it takes about 2 tanks of gas to have this furnace going. And there are regulations that in the chimneys of this crematories, that any kind of contaminants need to be filtered out. But there are also studies that they don't work quite as well. I don't know how often they are checked, controlled, who goes there and checks what comes out of these, smokestacks. I don't know. So, yeah.
But I thought this was interesting, the book I was showing you. I mean, people say, well, I can plant a tree and then all you have is carbon. It's literally everything's destroyed, your DNA and everything. So it's not like you're.
Oh, you mean to use the
to
ashes
cremate
to
ashes.
Yeah, I've actually just read, I read an interesting book just the last few days. So there are concerns if you just take the ashes, they're really alkaline. So often things don't grow that well unless you find a plant that really likes an alkaline environment. So there are companies that give you additional chemicals that you can mix with the ashes to make them a little more easier to use in the landscape and use for planting. So for example, there is a conservation cemetery. This one was in Tennessee. And if you want to bury ashes there, they have to be first amended and then they can be buried. So, yeah. So cremation, very popular still. Most of the cremations in our area happen in Mason. I've been to that crematory. You can be present if you choose so. So if you have a loved one who was cremated, you don't have to just say goodbye at the funeral. You can go with them and be there. And it's set up. I mean, it's not beautiful, but they make an effort to make it welcome. So I think. So the new not so new thing is called Aquamation. It has been used for animal disposition for quite a long time. It takes a little while to get used to, I think. I mean, first of all, you look at the machinery and it's like, So it's a big vessel. The body is put into the vessel. The body is put into a liquid. It's mostly water and it has some alkali in it, lye, if you want to, about 5%. And then the water is either at room temperature or hotter, and it's put under pressure. So depending on those circumstances, it takes about 4 to 16 hours to dissolve all the organic material, and the bones are left. So when you open this vessel, the liquid has sort of a grayish color, and all the bones are there, and then whatever implements we have, and they are sorted out, and then the bones are ground up, just like after a cremation. So when you get the cremains back, then they went through some kind of a mill to grind up all the bones. And so one of their sales pitches is you get more bone back because none of it burns. Sort of like, really, I mean, that's important, but for some people, maybe if you get like, a little more, but it uses way less energy. The liquid could be used for fertilizing, which is another thing that I think takes a little while for people to wrap their head around. But it can also just be washed away into the sewer system. And if people think that's gross, I mean, if there's an embalming, anything in the body that's replaced with embalming fluid goes down the drain also. So just keep that in mind. Just a second. And then I think there was just a radio section on a pet Aquamation business in Lansing. So I called the gentleman yesterday and had a longer discussion with him, and he's not here right now. And he just started his business in November. So if you're interested in it, at least for your pets, nature's way, I told him I would give a shout out. Yeah,
It's probably a strange question, but
nothing
I
is
would-
strange when it comes to death, isn't it?
Is there a situation where you're allowed to have the bones back that you can then bury?
You know what? I would totally think that you can. I don't see why not. I mean, there's no law that requires you to have ashes. I mean, the ground up bones. I'm sure you could, if that is something you can deal with. Like, you know, you have to, I mean, there you get the skull and, you know, all the bones. If that's something, yeah, right. I mean, I wouldn't see any reason why not. It's all about talking to whoever. Yeah.
As far as I know, Aquamation is only available in Washington, Oregon State.
No, I think you're thinking of human composition. So Aquamation is available, I didn't bring that. It's only illegal in New Hampshire, in the entire United States.
Wow.
It's legalized in about 20 plus. Nobody talks about, don't ask, don't tell in the other 20 plus. Michigan is one of them. So it's not illegal in Michigan because pet aquamation is perfectly legal here. It's just nobody has invested in this because, I mean, you can imagine this costs some money. So you need to have some investors. You need to have sure you have some kind of clientele that is going to use your business. I actually asked Drew of the nature thing. I said, have people contacted you about human aquamation? He said, oh yeah, all the time. But you have to be a funeral director in Michigan to operate something like this. And so he doesn't, he doesn't want to be a funeral director. So the closest where you can have aquamation is in Illinois. It's legal there. Close to Chicago is actually a facility that you can undergo this. Just a second. And the only thing is you are in charge, you are paying for having the body transported to wherever it is going to be disposed of. And you usually pay $2 per mile. That's sort of a standard transportation fee. So, you know, costs. And since we're all talking about green, I'm thinking, really? I mean, we're transporting a body all the way to Chicago to have it undergo this. Why not green burial in Williamston? But I do understand. I mean, you have to sort of what feels comfortable to you for your family. And for you, I mean, do you want to be in a liquid bath? You want to be in the soil? You want to be, you know, in hot environment? I mean, you know, it's a personal thing, I think, to make this decision. And that's why I'm here today. I'm just going to give you a lot of options. I'm not saying one is better than the other. These are the options and you decide. Yes.
I think you may have answered my question because when you were talking earlier about Lansing having to perhaps be an activist to get that going, are you allowed to be buried in Williamston if you live in Lansing, or can you go to Newaygo if you would choose?
Yes, absolutely.
You can go wherever you want?
Totally. There's no question about this. You just have to transport the body.
And
then
you have
you-
to legally in Michigan
Use
have
a
to have a
funeral
funeral director to do that.
Oversee that. Yeah, oversee that at least. Yeah. So it's a possibility. And in Illinois, you can definitely do it. Yeah. No problem. So once you have the ashes, I mean, you can either take the bones, do something with them. Or if you have the ashes, usually people can put them in an urn and you can do a lot of different things with the urns. And this is just a fun thing. I mean, people spread them in water. It's a lot of don't ask, don't tell. So people are always like, do I need permission? It is nice to have permission. The ashes are totally inert. They are not considered a biohazardous material. So from that point, you can spread them discreetly. I mean, I was once somewhere in the UP on a bridge, windy, and here I'm standing and there's a family. Here goes grandma, and ashes everywhere. And that was a little weird. But otherwise, nobody's going to make a big deal of it. I read you can even drop them from airplanes. That's legal because there are no biohazardous material. You are not allowed to drop the urn. But there's this thing now that you can send the ashes to a company and they will mix them with concrete and they help rebuild reefs, so artificial reefs. There are some urns where you get a little seed in them and hopefully a tree will grow out of them. You mix it with some other material, I suppose. So there's a lot of fun things. You can turn them into jewelry. You know, I mean, you can be very creative with your ashes, or you can just regularly bury them, or you can scatter them in traditional cemeteries, believe it or not. Often you need a vault for the urn. So, talking costs. So, one more thing. You okay with time? You're coming with me? Okay. Natural organic reduction, also called human composting, has been used for animals for a very long time on farms if they have mass deaths of, some disease happens on a farm. But in 2019, a architecture student in Seattle developed this for humans because she thought there should be a better way of disposing of bodies. And I was just there, so I'm going to show you my pictures first. So thrilled. I was in Seattle in May. They are zoned industrial enterprise. So you drive in Seattle through the harbor area, and it looks like this: silos and all kinds of oil refineries, and it's not particularly pretty. And I was with two friends, and I said, I bet you at least they have some flowers in front of it once we get this. I mean, it's all gravel roads. I mean, it's not pretty. And then you get to the building and it's absolutely gorgeous. I mean, the murals are just fantastic. And then on the side, you have all of these murals. And inside, it's all of these sort of nude colors and beautiful sayings on the wall. And I mean, it was just beautiful. And then they have this little room where the family can come and wash the body and prepare the body. It looked like a spa. You have all of these pretty jars, and here is their sort of paper mache. I think his name was James. And then they have a room where you can have a memorial service. And it's not quite as stuffy as many funeral homes. I mean, it was very modern looking. We had these beautiful green glasses and you could see into the actual area. And then you had just like when you have a crematory and you have the retort, and sort of there's an opening and you push the coffin in. So here you have the same thing. You have this opening and the coffin goes, and then it goes into that back area. And that's this area. We weren't allowed to take photos there. But if you're ever in Seattle, go. And they also do online presentations. So if you're interested, just get to their website and you can sign up. I think I'm signed up again for September just because I want to see what they do. So in the back, it looks like this. In each of these vessels contains a body. And when we were there were 53. They had 53 vessels, and I think 33 were actually occupied. And what happens is the body is embedded on straw. So if you're a home composter, you know that there has to be green material and brown material that gets into a compost pile to allow for composting. And so the body is the green material in this case, and then you put it and cover it with straw and wood chips and usually alfalfa, and you put it in this vessel. And then the body does what it needs to do. It's just like a compost pile, nothing happens. They just make sure that air flows through the area because it's always good, right? Like a compost pile, the more often you turn it and get oxygen to it, the better it works. The same here. So they just control this, and then they just monitor the temperature And whatever is on us and in us makes sure that we break down after death. You know, it's sort of, nature is really well designed that way. So the temperature rises to about 130 to 160 degrees. That makes sure everything breaks down. After 2 weeks, they sort of turn the whole thing. And then because they can see the temperature sort of dwindles a little bit, then the temperature goes up again. And after 4 weeks, they open the vessel and there are bones and usually nothing else left. If it's a particularly large body, they may do another 2 weeks. But basically, then they have the same that we have in a cremation or in aquamation. They have the bones. In nature, if you wait long enough, the bones also disappear, but that would be too long for them. So after 4 to 6 weeks, they also grind up the bones. They sort out all the bionics that we have in us, and then the family can have the soil back, which is about a truckload full, cubic yard, pickup truck.
Wow.
Yes, and some families choose to take it all and distribute it among friends, and they use it. The soil is beautiful. Soil is like the best compost, and people use it in their gardens. People use it in their flower pots, whatever. And if you don't want to deal with it, they have a contract with a natural preserve in Washington state where they are reforesting the area. And so all of the soil goes to that area and then is used to make the soil fertile again and the trees to grow. And it uses way less energy. It costs $7,000, I can tell you that, which is cheaper than most traditional funerals, more than cremation, probably aquamation. You can have your body shipped there. Again, you are responsible for the transport, which is on top of the 7,000. I loved this. I totally loved this. This is available now in 5 states. So it's Colorado and Vermont and Oregon, California. California, it's legal already, but they haven't started it. And I've heard that the group in Ann Arbor is thinking about it. So if you are an activist here and you can't wait, you're dying to have this here before you die. The group in Washington state is very helpful. I mean, they work actively on states to come on board, but they also will help you if you need material to be an activist in our state. I think it's a great option for places where we run out of burial space, and that is actually happening. I mean, United States, there's a lot of land here, right? But still, we're running out of cemetery space, particularly in urban areas. So I think for urban areas, this is a fantastic option. I love this, but I'm thinking I live in Williamston. I have a green burial ground right, 4 miles from my house. It would make no sense for my body to be shipped to Washington state, to be decomposed there. But again, if you think, they told me that there was a gentleman's body from Switzerland came to be decomposed. If you feel that this is what you need for your peace of mind when you die, I mean, they'll take it. And they were extremely nice. I mean, it was a wonderful, wonderful visit. If you're ever in Seattle, they usually give tours on Saturday. Just sign up. It's great. It's just great. The last thing I want to mention, and this is only because often somebody in the audience has willed his or her body, their body. So I just want to make sure, is anybody here? Or maybe somebody on our chat, on our Zoom thing. So MSU has a wonderful willed body program. In addition to Wayne State, University of Michigan, Central Michigan. So we do have options in this area. And the newest is we also have a body farm. If you read a lot of criminal stories, you may have heard of the body farm in Tennessee, where bodies for science are put out in the open, and then they are monitored how they decompose with weather and animals coming to the bodies. And it's very important for science for forensic reasons. And people donate their bodies to these called body farms. And there's no one in Michigan, in Marquette. It's pretty new, well, at least I heard about it not too long ago. And you can will your body there. There are a couple of things I need to say. So MSU World Body Program, I checked again yesterday. Right now, they do not transport the body. They used to. It was like you just called and they would take the body. So right now, the family, is in charge of finding somebody who transports the body to MSU. They say temporarily, but this temporarily has been now for like 6 months at least. Maybe it started during the pandemic. If the person dies on a Friday and they are closed, then you need to find a funeral director who is willing to store the body cold, not embalmed, until Monday. And I called several funeral directors in this area. When I'm on a mission. And there are several, they're like, well, what's in for us, right? I mean, we're storing a body, but you were just transporting it. Some said, sure, if it's somebody in my community. So, if you are within a certain area, if you live, I think these people were in Charlotte. So if you live in Charlotte, the funeral home in Charlotte, they may help you. But if you live in Williamston, like, no, we are not going to come all the way to Williamston and, carry this body around for you. So you have to, again, plan a little bit ahead. The other thing is that all of them will say, we make the decision if we accept the body at the time of death. So often people say to me, oh, I'm just going to will my body. And I'm like, well, you don't know if they take you. So you always have to have a plan B. And the reason is if there is a prolonged illness, if the body is really emaciated, or if the body is very heavy, or if the body is very, very old, they may say, for our purposes, this body is not what we need for the students to learn. Just a second. So you just have to know this. And just within the last couple of months at our church, 2 people told me that their mothers had willed their body and they were rejected. Right. So this is something you need to think about. Yes.
Yes, medical schools obviously want most or all of the original organs in place. You can't go in if you've had 4 different surgeries to remove body parts. They want a natural human body there for students to examine.
So, yeah, absolutely. So you just have to be aware of that, right? I mean, some people just are like, well, I will rule my body. Well, that's fine, but what if not? And then the other thing is your body will be embalmed because that's how it's going to be preserved for the students to work on. And in the end, it usually will be cremated. That's just how the medical schools deal. And then there will usually be very nice services that the students organize to sort of honor the bodies. And again, I think it's a wonderful thing to do. And if you go to the body farm, for sure you are not having the embalming. I don't know, I guess then, yes.
Some won't accept you if you're obese. You have to be a certain weight
Well,
for your height.
okay. I haven't read that they say if you are this pound will take you, if they're this weight will take you. They just say,
MSU had that.
yeah, well, but I don't think there's an actual number. They just say,
There
if
was.
you are, or there is,
There was years ago when I
Okay.
checked on it,
okay,
because I know of a lady that donated her husband's body.
yeah,
And there was definitely restrictions on the weight.
yeah. I know they say if you are overweight, we may not take, what the cutoff is, I don't know, but,
It wasn't a lot.
okay. Yeah, well, I mean,
Yeah,
you know,
it was
I mean,
quite
again,
strict.
students need to learn if they have to cut through a lot of fat and things. I mean, it may not be a good learning experience. I don't know. Yeah.
I'm already an organ donor, but how does that work? Does the hospital take what they want and then then I can will the rest of it to MSU?
No, if you're an organ donor, then you're an organ donor.
Okay.
And I think that's a wonderful thing too. And all of us should probably be organ donors. It's easy to do on your driver's license. Yes, so that's different. Then they don't take you. Yeah. Okay, so, yes.
You can be an organ donor for anything other than willing into science, correct?
Yeah, that's what I understand. Yeah. And we can donate a lot of tissues and, there's a lot of things that can be donated. So just so to wrap this up, and I think we're good in time, again, in terms of environmental impact, because we sort of came from there in the beginning. So conventional burial would be the least, and then, we're working our way up. And I think to me, I mean, Anika Quakenbush gave this to me, and I think this is really good. So this is pretty close together. I mean, I don't know, the natural burial, human composting, and then the conservation burial, but definitely between traditional cremation and then the rest, we can make good choices about, the environmental impact. The last thing I'm going to mention, but we didn't talk a lot about how do you plan the funeral, how do you make how do you make economical decisions, right? And I will leave some of this for the library. So the funeral industry is overseen by the Federal Trade Commission. And the Federal Trade Commission publishes a very nice booklet for the consumer on what do you need when you plan a funeral, like, when they try to sell you things. So for example, there is no law in any single state that requires you to be embalmed, right? I mean, it's always sort of one of their things, that you don't have to be embalmed. Even if it's the most traditional funeral, you don't have to be embalmed. So just be aware of those things and look at this. And they have a nice little table in the middle where you can sort of call 3 funeral homes and sort of get price comparisons. And maybe I'll throw this in quickly, but
my guest couldn't make it.
I'll go
May
back.
I have an extra?
You can take as many as you want. They're free and I have hundreds. So I'm going to give you the handout. The other thing I highly encourage you, and I do talks on advanced directives, it's probably usually not as fun as funeral planning because it's a little drier, but please have an advanced directive. They're very easy. You can do them in your home. You only have 2 friends to witness. You don't even have to go to a lawyer to do it. So even if you don't have a will and all the other things, but at least talk to your family. Even if you don't write anything down, talk to your family what you want. Take Thanksgiving, 1 hour, talk about it. There's a lot of pre-planning, not in terms of, I'm not saying you have to have every single song and poem that you want to have. Just, do you want to be cremated or not? That's a big decision. And believe it or not, sometimes somebody dies and they're like, what did mom want? I don't know. I have no idea. Well, that's a problem. Because if you have 5 children and some think you should have this done with the body and something this, then that's not a nice thing to start a mourning period. Yeah, usually don't prepay. Nobody in the non-funeral industry says pay. It's much better to put the money into some kind of a account that you have control over the money, and you can have a designated person that then can take control of the money when you die, because you may change your mind. You may all have prayed for cremation, and after this talk today, they're like, no, not really. And now what, right? Mm-hmm. So stay with your money, have it. Right now you even get some interest for it, and it's in your control. And when you move and when you change, so don't let them talk to you until, oh, you need to do this. So I'm giving another talk at the Hannah Center in September, and that's all about comparing prices. I have sheets where I show this is what they usually charge, this is what you need, this is what you don't need. So it's a little more in depth than what we mentioned. And then again, this is the Zoom meeting that Peter is going to do with us next Wednesday. And then I do have an email address that sort of is my death email. So just so I don't bury it in all the other stuff. And you can contact me. I also have a couple of cards that I'm happy to share with you. Yeah, and so we'll go back to that. Yeah, and that's it. So. All right, I hope you learned something, and we have time for questions. I don't know, Glenn, if there's Any chat, nothing? Okay, all right, everybody's happy. Yeah,
I have a question about burying the body, either green or cremation on your own property.
yeah, so if you have large enough property, and you, are within, away from your neighbors, you can do this. You need to get in touch with the health department. That's the only thing, but yes, totally.
If it's a green burial, you need help with
If you just want to start burying, if it's gathering ashes, nobody asks about that. But if you wanted to bury somebody, then you need to just make sure there's some record. Yeah, you can do that. Yeah, the good thing in this country is this is not everywhere. It's not in Germany. Once you get the ashes from the crematory, I mean, there they are, right? They can be in your closet for the next 15 years, or you can do whatever you want with them. In Germany, no. I mean, those ashes, there needs to be a record of where they end up. And they have to end up in some kind of cemetery, or they have to be, transported to another country. I mean, you can't just have ashes in your closet. Germans think that's really weird because it's just not legal and it's not done. So, yeah.
If you have the ashes and you own a plot, can you simply dig at your cemetery plot, put your ashes there? Okay,
No.
People have said to me, just what. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the cemetery will not say that to you, but I mean, who would know, right? I mean, I wouldn't do it when the sexton is walking around.
You said something about that there's you would need to get a 30-year lease for a green burial for a plot.
No, so this is what we do in Germany. What here, some green burial grounds, including Williamston, we said after 30 years, we're just reusing the grave. But then I'm sure we will give the family to option to rebuy the grave. So it's not necessarily that we say we're leasing this for 30 years, but
You're promising that you won't utilize it for 30 years.
oh, definitely. Yeah.
So is there any kind of is there a time, can two people be buried in the same plot? Is really what I want to know. So
You mean bodies? Actual bodies?
Yes, if they were shrouded. So
No, we wouldn't do that. Because see, it's only 3.5 feet.
that's
And
what I
if
was
you
wondering.
come with less than 30 years, you definitely would find remains, and that would not be very dignified for nobody involved in this whole process. So you would have to buy a plot right next to
And
that.
could you do that in advance?
Sure, yeah, you can buy plots. I mean, I'm envisioning that as soon as Williamston is open for business, you can come and say, I want to buy 2 plots.
Oh,
And then you have them.
I guess the time frame, I was almost thinking sort of like descendants. So,
Yeah.
so I guess.
Yes, well,
like the
so in
family
Germany,
vault.
yeah, so my mother, I tell you, my mother's mother died in 61. My mother went to that grave 30 years plus 30 years. So twice she rebought this, and then my mother passed away. So theoretically, we could have purchased this plot, and then my mother could have been buried there.
Yes.
Yeah, but it has to be a long enough time.
Yes. Yeah.
So if
I
you're
think that's
thinking
where I was-
yourself and maybe your grandchildren,
Yeah.
probably yourself and your spouse, that's a little bit, being
I know,
optimistic.
I-
So, yeah, but I mean, it has to be dignified,
Yes.
Yeah.
No, thank you for clarifying.
Yes.